So we have something a little more final here. So we have this, we have everything slanted to show movement, we have the arrow cut out, we have the type choice all selected. And now it's time to grid this, because right now we did a lot of gridding before to make sure the kerning or the spacing was good, but let's really grid this out so we can really refine this a little bit. And this is kind of bonus. So I have this as a bonus section. You can use grids and really get down to little small details if you want, or if you want a more natural organic feel, you can skip gridding altogether and have something a little more interesting. But since this is a pretty, everything kind of lined up pretty nicely, let's just apply it to the grid to really just make sure we have the correct spacing between elements. So I'm just going to put on our grid. I'm going to adapt this to the grid. Just putting the bottom right about here. I just kind of, just putting it on a particular spot here. I like to start with the baseline down on the bottom. And so now we can go in and go, okay, that's baseline. We can even take some of these elements and even do an alignment down at the bottom so we know they're all aligned. And we might have to do some hand stuff. So let's go down, bring this down. See how this overlaps the baseline? That is okay. In this case, typography, there's some parts of typography that can come down and escape that baseline, and that's probably a good case there. Let's make sure everything on the top, and sometimes you can just take a square. Just kind of make sure everything's aligned properly. Just taking a box, kind of my cheap, quick way to do it. And we know there's equal spacing here because we did the offset path tool and was able to carve that out perfectly. And you know, you can even check the distance between these two items. So I'm just drawing a simple line. And I'm just going to duplicate this and just see how it compares over here. Is it the same sizing? Does it need to be adjusted a little bit? It looks like, and I'm probably making these different colors will help too. So you can see there's a little bit of a difference here. So what if I move this over? And these are just really small, almost down to the pixel adjustments. But just little things to think about when you start to really make this really big on banners. These small little details really matter in terms of spacing. And we can start to kind of draw some lines here. So I'm just going to get kind of a generic line. I'm going to hold down Shift after I click once, and I'm able to make a perfectly straight line. And this is just going to help me visualize everything. And we could just duplicate that. I'd like to put it right here on this ascending line. Let's do our cap height right there. And that extends outside. That's okay. That's kind of the similar way this U dips down and the F dips over. That's a very common typography thing you see. Not everything bumps up, because if we were to have the F come down here, then all of a sudden the L is dominant. And we don't want that. And that's why we have that little bit exceeding over the top. And you can get really detailed. This is really up to you to help you find areas. And I'm just kind of seeing how the width of that can match maybe the width of some of these strokes. Now I'm going to do some diagonal because we have a lot of diagonal movement here. So I'm just going to make a line. And if you had a very curvy symbol or logo, you can do this with circles as well. You'll see that done frequently. Bringing this over. And I'm just kind of doing each line, just making sure they're all the same, all the way across. They have the same angle. Of course, we did an envelope warp, so they're all going to match because we did the same warp effect on all. So far everything's lining up really well with this particular one. Let's do this. You can even do the shape of the triangle, but I already did that with the grid, so I know that's kind of a perfect triangle shape, but then angled the same way that the characters were. So now when it comes to placement of video, that wasn't really necessarily finalized. We had a great carved out space for it, but now we can find out the perfect spacing for this using the grid technique. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a box here. I'm just going to fill this in. Let's try like a pink or something that we haven't used yet. And we're just going to reduce the transparency so we can see everything. And this is going to help guide our placement. So we have this nice angle here of the U. Let's angle the tip of the V right here to right there. Let's see if we can't extend that up, right? Just bump it up right there to that line. So now we have kind of some lines that we can use as guides. There's also this nice line here on the grid that I can put the base line of the video on. And you can even get crazy and even have a letter in each slot. But I think I like the spacing already between the lettering. We could extend this O out and have it bump up right up against this end. We were able to frame video in a great way because we were able to use a couple of these diagonal lines when we gridded it out. The grid doesn't look pretty, but we can carve all that off and use the shape builder tool to make all those lines even for presentation purposes, because it's great to show this to a client because they can really see that you took serious effort to make sure there was alignment and that there was a purpose between the size and the placement of particular characters. So you may end up with something like this, just showing that there's equal spacing between characters, and we found placement for the video using the horizontal lines. So we're able to take that really seriously, and now it's time to do one of my favorite parts of this whole process, and that's going to be getting down to color. So now that we have everything gridded out, we feel very happy with everything. Now it's time to bring the client in on this decision before we get into color. Because when you give clients a lot of options, they hesitate. They have a hard time choosing. They go back and forth. And they add a lot of revisions too early on. So you want to present one solid concept, sometimes two solid concepts to the client. But we want to do this on one nice, concise page. And we want to show them the horizontal presentation, a vertical presentation, and a square presentation. Mostly because we need to show how adaptable the logo is. It's not just a really cool logo. You can put this on all products and all digital and print mediums. And now's the time we need to reverse our logo and see how it works on a darker background for presentation. Because we want to show them how it looks on lighter backgrounds, but it's realistic that a logo is not always going to be on white. There's times where it's going to be on different colored backgrounds and photography, and we want to show how flexible it is on darker and lighter environments. So in our presentation, we want to have something just like this. We have a column on the white and a column on the dark, and we're showing the flexibility. And this is just one concept. Never put more than one concept on one page because it just confuses them. So what you want to do if you have two concepts, you have 2 pages, and you dedicate that whole page to present the logo in all these different situations. So do I present this in black and white? Yes, because color is going to mess everything up, and we're going to get approval for color next time. We're going to send that a different round of revisions to the client that's going to include color options. That's for another time. So is this it? Why don't I present all these flashy mock-ups? Well, that's more down the line in the branding process. When it comes to logo design, you need to explain to the client in the email where you send this, JPEG or a PDF, high resolution of course, that this is more about getting down to the root concept. It's about the concept over all these flashy things. If we can make it look amazing in the future with polish and drop shadow and gray, whatever you want to add to your logo, we're going to get to that later. But just explain to the client it's about finding the core, deep, value-adding parts of the logo. This is where the core of the logo will be approved and presented. So as long as they understand that color is going to come later, that the final polishes and extra stuff that go with it, the more of the branding side of things will come a little bit later, but they just need to be happy with the concept, with the idea of the arrow, with the idea of the F, and if they're happy with that, we're going to move on to the next stage. So what I want you to do is just practice. I have this client presentation. If you're doing a different logo throughout this process, put your own logo in all these different variations. And in this case, I did a horizontal presentation, and I was able to use the grid to find out the nice placement for video in a horizontal presentation. And that was just finding kind of a thickness, the same thickness as the arm of the F. I thought that looked really good there. And I thought the sizing was really good because video is just not the most important part of the word. And it kind of matches the balance that we have on the vertical presentation. So that's how I came up with that. But I want you to be able to put together whatever you're working on now, whether you're working on the same video Flux idea or you're doing a whole different logo. I want you to be able to present this in one page, export it as a PDF or a JPEG, an RGB format. It's really important to have RGB format because CMYK, it can look really strange on a client's computer if they're not opening it up in the right program. So keep everything in RGB for presentation. And this is also a digital-based logo, so we're keeping it RGB for now.